Thank you, Dr. O'Donnell. Thank you, all of you. When my family is brought up, I sometimes point out that with 9 children and 36 grandchildren, my last name, Haas, is Dutch for rabbit. But just living up to the name. But thank you, Dr. O'Donnell, for the kind introduction. Years ago, if I were ever in Rome at the same time as Dr. and Mrs. O'Donnell, and it was a Thursday, we would be certain to encounter one another in the chapel of the Teutonic College, because then Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger would celebrate the morning Mass. And we never, ever wanted to miss the opportunity of even a brief exchange of greetings with that brilliant and saintly man. Christendom College is truly a light to the nations. It is renowned for its scholarship and for its fidelity to the Catholic faith. We congratulate all of you students today who have worked so hard for your diplomas, and congratulate your parents and other family members who have given you support throughout what has certainly been a challenging, demanding, joy-filled, and I'm sure at times exhilarating journey. Today we look to the future with hope and excitement. My father always used to say, as the twig is bent, so grows the tree. No matter the storms that ravage the young saplings as they grow, if the twig is properly set, the outcome will be as sturdy as an oak. But on this day of joy and hope, let me direct you, graduates of Christendom, to the challenging words of St. Peter, which we all heard a couple of weeks ago at Mass. On the day of Pentecost, the Prince of the Apostles stood up and exhorted the gathered assembly, "Save yourselves from this corrupt generation." How apt are those words today? You're going out into a world which has become almost unrecognizable from the one I faced when I was your age. When I was a young graduate, abortion was still illegal, and unborn children were secure in their mothers' wombs. Physicians still devoted themselves to healing their patients rather than helping them kill themselves. There was no gay agenda, no transgender movement, there was no LGBTQ lobby. Families were still generally intact. But so much of that has changed in the span of a single lifetime, mine. But what has led to this disorder? Well, for one thing, we as a society have turned our backs on the Judeo-Christian tradition on which our nation was founded and by which it flourished. But we've even turned our backs on the noble classical traditions, which are also our legacy. 500 years before the birth of our blessed Lord, the pagan physician Hippocrates composed an oath which guided physicians for almost 3,000 years, but which has been jettisoned in our own day. The pagan Hippocratic oath was easily adopted by Christians in the early church. Indeed, the oath has been found written out in the form of a cross on ancient manuscripts. With that oath, physicians swore before God and family, not only "I will do no harm," the oath was also quite specific. "I will give no one a lethal medicine, even if asked, and I will never give a woman anything to induce an abortion." As you know, graduates of medical schools no longer take the Hippocratic Oath, leaving our country with almost 700,000 abortions every year and with 10 states that have now legalized physician-assisted suicide. As St. John Paul II declared in his encyclical, The Gospel of Life, we now find ourselves in a culture of death. Innocent human life is now destroyed with impunity. The coercive powers of the state are used to restrain those who would attempt to save the life of a threatened unborn child. John Paul II warned us of this. He wrote that when abortion and euthanasia are legalized, quote, "The state is no longer the common home where all can live together on the basis of principles of fundamental equality, but it is transformed into a tyrant state which arrogates to itself the right to dispose of the life of the weakest and most defenseless members, from the unborn child to the elderly." We face a tyrant state in our day, as St. Thomas More did in his. St. Thomas More did not look for trouble, but when the faith and its moral tenets were challenged by the tyrant state of his day, he happily went to his death rather than cede one principle of the moral law. Today, the tyrant state may not carry a name like Henry VIII or sit upon a gilded throne. Rather, it is more amorphous. Its ideas dispersed throughout our cultural institutions, which makes it more difficult to identify and resist. But you, Christendom graduates, are equipped to confront today's tyrants by looking to the example of St. Thomas More, by invoking his prayers and drawing on the unparalleled education you have received here in the Shenandoah Valley. These can be confusing times. We've entered a period when, as our Lord said, evil is called good and good evil. St. Thomas Aquinas, with all his profound intellect, was able to state the obvious in a manner that could be easily understood, apparently until now. St. Thomas taught that truth is the conformity of mind to reality. But we live in a day when it seems reality itself cannot be grasped. We live in a time when 5 members of one of our most elite social institutions, the Supreme Court, in a decision known as Obergefell, tried to overcome and overturn reality itself, to overturn the very order of nature itself by declaring that a marriage can exist by 2 individuals of the same sex. St. John Paul II said in his encyclical, quote, "The appearance of the strictest respect for legality is maintained, but what we have is only the tragic caricature of legality." Marriage and family is the most fundamental, indeed the most essential unit of society, yet even it has fallen victim to incessant attacks from the tyrant state. The United States now has the lowest marriage rates in its history, and I'm glad to see that's going to be reversed, because I don't know how many of this graduating class told me that they got engaged, they're going to get married in your brand new chapel. So you're the future, and we're looking forward to it. Recent estimates show that more than 40% of births in the United States occur outside of marriage, up from 28% in 1990. Almost 18 million children live in homes without fathers. Assuredly, there are single parents who've heroically sacrificed for their children and raised them to be virtuous and godly, but I'm certain that they themselves will readily admit that the plan and design of God cannot be improved upon and would be preferable to their own situation. You know, these developments were not by accident. For decades, there have been concerted, coordinated efforts to undermine the moral order that guided our society for generations. I remember when I was a teenager, when Playboy magazine was first published. And as a rather devout teenager, I was horrified at the publication of that magazine. I was even more horrified when I learned that Playboy magazine was offering free subscriptions to any priest, minister, or rabbi who requested it on their church or synagogue stationery. There were and have been purposeful attempts to corrupt the very guardians of morality in our society, the clergy, and to undermine the nuclear family. In 2014, I was privileged to visit with Pope Emeritus Benedict in his residence in the Vatican Gardens. After we exchanged pleasantries, he looked at me and said, "The next great challenge the church is going to have to face is gender ideology." I was surprised by his comment, but I now see he was prophetic. We have been hit with a tsunami of transgender ideology, and Catholic healthcare institutions are being sued because they refuse to perform mutilating surgeries on men who want to be surgically altered to look like women, or women who want to appear as men. There are indeed individuals who suffer from a psychological disorder known as gender dysphoria, because of which they experience distress thinking that they are a gender other than their biological sex. The church must stand ready, however, to help these people through counsel, psychological interventions, and prayer. However, there's been a veritable onslaught of transgender ideologues who are trying and happy to try to overthrow the very order of nature itself. Children are given chemicals to keep them from biologically going through puberty, to allow them to try later on to take on the attributes of the opposite sex. Children are subjected to these interventions even though the side effects can be devastating: liver damage, reduced bone density, excessive weight. Some adults subject themselves to mutilating surgeries and take hormones natural to the opposite sex to change their secondary sex characteristics. However, such a rebellion against God's creation exacts a high price. An institute in Sweden, the Karolinska Institute, published a report which was of a long-term study of up to 30 years of people who had so-called transition. After 10 years, the study found they began to have emotional problems. Most alarmingly, their suicide mortality rate was 20-fold above the comparable non-transgendered population. All these developments are to be anticipated in an increasingly secularized society. As the fathers of the Second Vatican Council said in Gaudium et Spes, when the Creator is forgotten, the creature itself becomes unintelligible. In our day, the Creator has been forgotten, and we now live in a world which is simply unintelligible. When the Creator is dismissed, we presume to become the Creator. Oh, we can turn men into women and women into men. We can create three-parent embryos. We can assemble designer babies. It was the godless communists, after all, who declared themselves to be the artisans of humanity. The story is told of a CEO of a biotech company, quite proud of his work, and he often told colleagues that he thought he could have done a better job with the creation than God did. Well, the day he finally came there, he's standing at the pearly gates, and he demanded to see God. And St. Peter says, "You sure you want to?" And he said, "I'm sure. I really have to talk to him." So he took him to the throne of majesty, and God looked down at him and said, "So you think you could have done a better job?" And the man said, "Yeah, I do." And God said, "Okay." And the CEO of the biotech company said, "I challenge you. Let's see." So God came down off his throne, knelt in the dust, took his hands, gathered together the dirt and the dust, molded and shaped them, breathed into them, and this magnificent man leapt from his hands onto the ground. And God said, "You think you can do better than that?" And the man said, "Yes." So he got down on his knees, started pulling together the dirt and the dust, and God from his throne said, "Hey, you make your own dirt." We can create nothing, nothing. All we can do is manipulate what God himself has created. But we live in a day when we don't know what man is or what woman is. We no longer know what marriage is, what a family is. We no longer know if we no longer know what such concrete realities are, how will we possibly be able to conceive abstract realities such as justice, fortitude, or charity? When the Creator is forgotten, the creature himself is unintelligible. So let me turn around now. St. Peter's harsh admonition: save yourselves from this corrupt generation. I call on you to heed the apostles' call, but to extend it. Save yourselves from this corrupt generation so that in the years to come, you can help save that corrupt generation. That is what John Paul II, the successor to St. Paul, called on us to do. He repeatedly urged us to work and to struggle for the re-evangelization of culture. Your task will be to help reorder the world. It will be your task to work to bring it once more into alignment with what God created it to be. The challenges are there, but we can be of good cheer because we are Catholics. We are the ones who love to embrace reality for what it is. We are the ones who love to embrace the opposite sex rather than trying to turn ourselves into it. We are the ones who love to dance and sing and drink, enjoying the goods of the created order, which can be the best antidotes to a disordered world. As Belloc famously said, "Wherever the Catholic sun doth shine, there is laughter and good red wine." At least I've always found it so, benedicamus Domino. Catholics are the ones who kneel in adoration before him through whom all things were made. Catholics kneel before the one who grants intelligibility to his creation as he calls it into existence. You are all privileged to be educated in the beautiful surroundings of the Shenandoah Valley, where you daily behold the glories of God's created order. The forging of a new Christian society is going to be no easy task, and most certainly not accomplished in your lifetime. It will require sacrifice, the enduring of social opprobrium, perhaps even martyrdom in some fashion or another. But then again, you have been prepared for it, formed for it, educated for it here at Christendom College. St. Thomas More said, "One of the greatest problems of our time is that many are schooled, but few are educated." That cannot be said of you graduates of Christendom. Through the rigorous and faithful program of this college, you have been truly educated, and you parents should never regret the sacrifices you made for your children's education here at Christendom. At the beginning of his admonition on Pentecost, St. Peter quotes the prophet Joel, which can also be applied to this assembly in Front Royal, Virginia today. Peter declared, quoting the Holy Scriptures, "God declares, I will pour out my Spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. Yea, and on my men servants and on my maid servants in those days I will pour out my Spirit, and they shall prophesy, and I will show wonders in the heaven above and signs on the earth beneath." So, dear graduates of Christendom, as I read somewhere, dare to be great. Holy Mary, our hope, seat of wisdom, pray for us.